good. So perfect. Okay, so awesome. Super excited for today. I'm happy to have Ravi here today, who's a great friend, someone who I've worked with in the past. And I feel this show is going to be great because we're diving into a subject that I'm very close with. We're working into the worlds of data science, of AI, of technology in general. And I feel like this is going to be a very informative conversation. So really excited to jump in with a good friend of mine, Ravi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carl. I'm happy to be here. Excited, to be honest. Yeah. Looking forward to the conversation that we kind of have, and just looking forward to kickstarting it all.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for the invitation. It's my first podcast, so it was kind of nice to kind of being able to get out here and just kind of experience what it is like.
Yeah.
And to kind of just talk about some of the things like that I love.
Yeah.
AI and machine learning. In particular.
That's awesome, man. I feel like, and again, you're someone who's extremely easy to talk to, but you're definitely one of the smartest people I know personally. So I think these are the type of conversations that I think are, not only really cool to learn your background, but also cool to learn what you're doing and how they actually affect us in like real world, like live action right now. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So let's get started with this because for this show, definitely want to start with getting to know your story, getting to know how you've gotten to where you've gotten to right now. And then obviously, we'll jump more into, obviously talking about AI, machine learning, data science, and get that general information. Then, of course, we'll finally end up with any resources that you can share with us and, from the amazing world of Ravi. But we'll definitely be having you on more and more and more. So to start, how would you define success?
Good question. I think success for me is my vision. Right. So I'm a fairly like an envisioning person, right? Like I work by imagining things in front of me. If I have to build a shelf, I imagine the shelf. If I have to build a car, I imagine the car, right? So I'm very visual. So for me, visual and vision or my imagination is important, right? So my idea of success is then kind of stems on from that, right? And that means I like to have a vision. And I like to try to reach that goal, reach that vision. And for me, that's success. And for some details, and particularly, I think my vision has changed over time, right? Sometimes it might just be, being really cool and really fun, right?
Yeah.
Having a lot of friends, or kind of having a lot of experiences, right?
Yeah.
I think that is like maybe how a lot of people start.
Yeah.
And the way I've kind of grown is it's become more about kind of seeing my ideas that I think are good ideas, and then talking about those ideas to others, and getting feedback on those ideas, and eventually seeing those ideas come to fruition.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's my idea of success.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I feel like, for me, that's such a great way of explaining success. And a lot of times when you hear it, I've never really heard it broken down like that in terms of having a vision is part of what success is to you. And of course, as you've grown and adapted, that vision continues to change, right? Because at first maybe you thought, at first it was, I want to be one of the coolest, people in the world. And then it changes from that to being like, I want to be someone that impacts the world positively type thing as you're growing and you're going through things. And so for me, it's like, first of all, let's get a solid understanding of who you are. So what are you currently doing? What's your background? Can you share a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a Torontonian. I'm a human. I have a bad sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I think those are kind of like the staples. But what I am and who I am, it's I like to be busy. I'm a creative. I'm a hard worker. And I'm kind of like a friendly person, right? Like I've been told, I'm very personable.
Yeah.
And that kind of has not necessarily stuck throughout my entire life. It has kind of ebbed and flowed through my life as I've made a variety of choices to kind of maintain or lose that. But I still think even today I brought it back. I brought back this idea of being personable and communication as being a highly sought after attribute that I'm trying to instill in myself. Right? And it's not easy. Relationships are difficult.
Yeah.
And communication is kind of is a building block to relationships. So, you know, like building on that level of communication and having that a capability is really what I'm kind of striving after as of late.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, overall who I am, though, it's kind of a bit of an A, bit of B, right? So I like, you know, I do enjoy like engineering and building things, and that's kind of how I kind of grew up. Maybe I didn't have the greatest of knack. Some people might have heard of that before, like having the knack of engineering. Yeah. Right. I didn't really necessarily have that. You know, instead of like taking apart things and putting it back together, I only took it apart. Right. Growing up, right? Like I wasn't able to put it back together. I didn't have that level. Yeah. You know, I was more like smashing cars together than like building cars. You know. Yeah. But excuse me, there were parts of me that were still kind of building things, right? Yeah. You know, maybe like getting creative with paints and stuff like that still. Yeah. So I guess, you know, staying creative was kind of who I was and who I have been as of late. And
Did you always want to be an engineer? Was that something that you always thought about, like, you know, growing up, or, you know, in terms of a career choice, or, yeah?
That's a good question, though. Well, I just liked computers. So once, you know, once I got my hands on like old PlayStation, or not PlayStation, Super Nintendo, right? So once I got a hands on like a used Super Nintendo, you know, I really got to kind of get involved and get just so immersed in video games. Yeah. So that's kind of how it started for me. Yeah. And then moving to computers after that, playing video games, and then moving onwards to navigating the internet. Yeah. And then moving on to hacking computer games is kind of where I really found my love of like behind the scenes. Yeah. You know, creating bots I didn't even create it. I downloaded it. Yeah. But even that was enough, right? Like I downloaded a bot to play this old video game. And then I moved into, and this was the peak of that moment, was I was able to figure out how to hack the client, the exe file, right? I know it's a bit technical, but hack the exe file to inject hex code to give me superpowers. Yeah. Right? And like that was the pinnacle of like, whoa, this is computers. Yeah. Right? And it, from video games. I mean,
So I guess your love of technology started with playing video games from a young age. Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
And then you basically from there was that where I guess it intrigued you to start to learn more about how it worked, and then obviously getting into being able to get into hacking?
Yeah, I think I fell into it. Yeah. To be honest, I really did. You know, I fell into it. The video game I played was time consuming. You know, I always tried to, I guess, try to like excel at it in some ways, right? I always wanted to try to get the most out of it. Yeah. Right? And so I would look up walkthroughs online, you know, I'd do that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily, and I guess maybe I'm a bit of a cheater in that way, I wouldn't necessarily put all the effort to do it myself. Yeah. Because it's a lot of effort, and I'm like, I don't want to do all that. Yeah. Right? So I found these hacks, these tricks, right? To go through it and to kind of get that sense of satisfaction that I was looking for, but without having to necessarily invest a monumental amount of time to get 100%. Yeah.
No, I think that's really smart though, and that's something I've heard. Like, you know, smart people, you're not necessarily going to have to make the same mistakes as everyone's made. You look at what other people have done, and you can say, okay, I don't have to make those kinds of mistakes. I'm going to go ahead and acquire the knowledge this way, right? And I feel like, especially in regards to what you're saying, is or, you know, I think it was, as Bill Gates said something, it's like, if you want to find a good way of doing something, get a lazy person to do it, because they'll figure out the quickest way to be able to do it, right? Yeah. So it's not to necessarily say it's in terms of being lazy. It's in terms of how you're actually able to acquire the knowledge and be able to figure out how to do a job really well, right? Yeah. And so in this sense and you were saying you look up videos to be able to acquire to you know, learn how to hack. So is that one of the ways, especially being a visual learner, that you started to build your skills, is through learning from other people, like, you know, looking at mentors or looking at videos?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, mentors, I don't think was the path for me, unfortunately. I am a mentor. Right, I've done mentorship myself, but I never really had a mentor myself, and I think it would be amazing. I learned through just my own 2 feet, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. Like, I go through it, I make mistakes, I get messy, and I learn from them. Yeah. And that's really maybe not the fastest way, but it's very practical. Yeah. That's very really hands-on. Cool. Yeah. So that's kind of how I've done it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, for me, I like that, because I feel like it's cool to kind of, you walk your own path. Do you know what I mean? I feel like trial and error is also one of the best ways you can learn, or experience is a great way you can learn. So taking the time to actually jump in and try something, and again, it's like you learn from that experience, right? So
you do.
Yeah.
I mean, just to add more context, though, I mean, I have had, I think, positive influences, in my life of like teachers, like really good teachers, my parents, right? Even just music, like they inspire me and I learn from them, right? So that's kind of part of the crux is if it's like YouTube videos or if I'm just reading like online forums, I'm learning about how to do something, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think that's how I went about it.
So did you go to school for engineering? Is that what you went to school for?
Yeah, I did. So again, I guess, there were some moments of critical moments in my life, right? That really changed my path. And one of them was grade 12 calculus, right? Like I wasn't a straight A student, but calculus, grade 12 calculus, I had an amazing teacher, and that was critical for me because I did so much homework. I got like an A plus.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, whoa, I liked this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, because I didn't have like grade A's or I didn't have all straight A's, I got into a variety of universities, across Ontario. And I ended up choosing to go to Metropolitan University, right? This downtown Toronto.
Yeah.
So that's where I applied for the computer program because, my love of computers and video games. So that's kind of how I went up to do that. Yeah.
Was your goal to work in the gaming world? Because I know obviously me and you met at talkAItive, which you co-founded and designed the AI there.
Yeah.
So for you, was your goal to either work in AI or is it to more so go into gaming? Like what I guess once you got into the data science and obviously working towards this sense, what was your goal? What did you want to do with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's like, again, I think that was another just pivotal moment where I had a really cool teacher and I just gravitated towards them and towards system modeling is what they called it in that industry, right? In computers. And I just followed it. And excuse me. I followed that and kind of that was brought me to data science. Yeah. Right. Aspirations and dreams, if that is as cheesy as it sounds, right? Yeah. I wanted to be an astronaut. To add extra cheese to this cheese platter, right? I wanted to be an astronaut and I'm like, I'm going to do it. So I was like, really, I was working on my education quite a bit, right? I made that pivotal decision, right? To not just hang out with my friends all the time and just like chill, because I did a lot of that. Yeah. But I made that pivotal moment to not do that and to focus on my education.
Yeah. I mean, so obviously, because I think that's one of the things that you learn as you become more and more successful is sacrifice, right? Because it's like you have to pick between, are you going to do the late night parties with your friends or are you going to focus on building yourself? What helped you stay disciplined and what are things that you think you can share with other people? Because certainly in the field that you're in, and I think right now being an engineer is probably one of the most sought after jobs that there is, or, most, I would say most revenue generating at least, you know what I mean, on the planet right now. Well, so is, how do you, or what steps did you take or what are things you did to help discipline yourself to focus on the amount of work that you had to do and also organize yourself to be successful and come out, in the way that you have?
So I think the start of it was that just crux, that decision moment, right? Where I was like, okay, I can hang out with my buddies. I can, just kind of do like summer jobs for the rest of my life, which are fun. Being a security guard, it only gets you so far. I mean, it's great. I think it's a good job to have, but I think I wanted to just kind of move on to something else. And I wanted something more for myself than to just walk around for 12 hours a day. Yeah. It's pretty hard. Yeah. Right. And so that was that kind of like decision factor. That was an influence to the decision. And that's how I kind of pivoted. Right. So I was like starting out kind of just hanging out with my buddies. And I was like, okay, I need to change my life. And that was kind of what gave me that discipline. Right. And to keep the ball rolling, once I realized that's what I wanted, I just entertained myself. Yeah. It sounds really silly, but at that time, YouTube was coming out. Yeah. And so I would have music or I would have music videos playing as I do my work. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I would just always follow, and that was the entertainment factor, right? So that would allow me to stay up till like midnight every day while I was at school and 10 o'clock on Fridays, right? Having good friends also to kind of maintain some sort of like schedule without overdoing it and getting burnout. I found was, in the end, in retrospect, I found to be quite important. Yeah. And then the other yeah, and then the other thing I think I was thinking of, sorry, was yeah, actually, it was just that. Yeah, sorry. It's just the entertainment pieces.
I feel like that's super important because for me, I'm a music person, right? From the moment I wake up, I've got my account, my music playing. As I'm making it through my day, I always have my headphones in because I find it soothing, but also in terms of helping me focus. You know, it also depends on the range, right, or the time, right? So it's like before I do the interview, I'm listening to tracks that are gonna pump me up, you know. But like something that's kind of weird, and I don't know if I should share this or not, but for some reason, when I need to focus or when I'm like, you know, in deep work, or, you know, whether it's trying to crush a bunch of admin work or even before a pitch or something, or writing a pitch, if I'm gonna do a pitch, I get hyped up. But if I'm writing a pitch or something like that, or working on a strategy, I need to listen to love songs.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. So I like it's either like love songs like Adele, I'll listen to, or like heartbreak songs like Adele, or a lot of Motown. I grew up on Motown because of my parents. So I find, you know, music and certainly a way of entertaining yourself is super important as you discipline yourself through these things, and something that can bring ease to focusing on a task. So I definitely vibe with that. So obviously, like, so now you've gone through school, you kind of focused with and gotten your degree out of the work you've done. What was your first role? What job did you go into, and how did you get started, you know, as a data scientist?
Yeah, so after my master's, I had a huge burnout. Right? I was just all over the place. I lost my identity, really. I know.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I was. I viewed and I saw. I view and I saw the world in a telescope.
Okay.
Right. So, and that's kind of what happened with my master's, is that I changed from having a broad horizon view of things to be able to listen more and to see at the same time, right? To just being able to really see and from a telescope. So I changed in that way, and I was quite
like, do you mean like your view of the world, your perspective of the world changed in general, or even in just the way you were doing things?
No, as a person. Yeah. Like fundamentally as an individual.
Was that part of maturation, or part of like what you learned with doing your master's, do you think?
I think it was a bit of a, you know, for me it was like you know, coming out of my shell. I was a Toronto boy, grew up and born here, I guess. So, you know, I spent most of my life here, and I didn't get that experience to branch out, which I think is paramount. It's really healthy to be able to kind of, you know, move away and to go to a different town and to kind of experience that culture shock. Yeah. So I didn't get that until I left, and that kind of stirred me up a bit, right? And so I came back having a little bit more of a different viewpoint, and this happened to be in some cases a little bit more narrowed viewpoint. I'm gonna say, to be honest. Yeah. And so coming.
Where did you move to? Sorry, to not to cut you off.
Oh, no problem. I mean, it's not indicative, I think, of the city. It's the program itself is challenging. Having a master's program is quite difficult. I went to Carleton University, so it's quite a successful engineering university, and I had a great professor there as well. So I learned so much, and I put the effort in, right? Like nights and days. And, you know, just kind of like, I think mixing up like working a lot and then losing my support system kind of took a lot out of me. So I had a big case of burnout. Yeah. So coming out of school, I was just kind of doing whatever, and I found a job through a family friend, and he gave me a 9-month position at it's a medium-sized company in Markham. And so I was working with him, you know, creating routers, high-end digital routers, which was fun. It was all C++. It wasn't machine learning. Yeah. But you know, me being thoughtful, I was like, okay, I need to practice my programming skills, right? So programming and software engineering as well as data science is quite important. Yeah. You know, being able to write what your thoughts are in code, translating that is a process. Yeah.
So how would you actually? I think that's a great way to actually break this down. So what is a software engineer, and what do they do? And then let's also take a look at what is a data scientist and what do they do? And then finally, machine learning. What is machine learning? So can we break that down in that sense?
For sure. So computer engineering, it's a big tree, and there's a lot of branches to it, right? So for instance, there's the computer apps, so app design. There's networking. There's CPUs, like creating chips. And then there's like creating, and I guess those are the three main branches.
The three main
right?
branches, okay.
And so essentially what a software engineer does typically is they create software to build on top of these systems. So for chips, you're building firmware to build on top of these chips, right?
Yeah.
You're using the instructions that have been built into these chips to generate programs. And these programs can do anything, right? Now that we see, with AI, they can do almost anything, right?
Yeah.
But one program can just be reading, like we'll call it mail, right? Reading small boxes of mail and routing it to the correct location.
Yeah.
Right. So you can think a digital post office is the internet. And so that automation of that process is where software comes into play. It reads the address and it routes it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's software, right?
Yeah.
It does that. And so what a software engineer does is build, maintain, debug, and test these kind of softwares.
Okay, that's awesome. And so then, how would you define data science and how it applies to this?
So for data science, it's more niche. It's just a more niche of software engineering. And for data science, what we're doing is we're mixing more mathematics. So we're integrating mathematics into the software. And so some of the mathematics we want to do is sometimes called system modeling. And so a good example is, grade 12 calculus is y equals mx. So like that equation for a straight line, right? And all the other equations from that course. But a straight line, you can use that to predict things. Okay. Let's say, for example, the object that we're talking about, let's say it's a ball, it follows a very simple path, and that path can be predicted or modeled by a straight line, right? So y equals mx plus b is data science. And essentially that was the root of data science, right? So it's the equation for gravity is data science. The equation of a parabola when you throw a ball or when you shoot an arrow, that's data science, right? It's modeling a system in an environment, right? So data science is kind of taking these mathematical concepts and moving them into software. Now, that's obviously oversimplified, but data science, what they kind of do is they work with something called open form solutions, where it's not like the equation for gravity, right? Or the equation for an arrow, where those things are closed, right? Or the speed of light, right?
Yeah.
You've heard of E equals mc squared, right?
Yeah.
That's a closed form solution for energy is equal to mass times the speed of light, right?
Yeah.
It works all the time, give and take, right? It works all the time, and there's no uncertainty about it. So that's called what's in the industry called closed form solutions. So data scientists, they sometimes work with things called open form solutions, which is more like y equals to mx plus b, where it works sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's most of the modern, I'll just finish, like most of the modern data science stuff that we're talking about with like, AI, that's all open form solutions where it works most of the time.
Yeah. That's cool. I mean, it's good to get a breakdown and better understand, even specifically, what you do on a day-to-day basis, but also to get a solid, because like I feel like people also need to learn, what each of these things do and how they work as well, right? And so with that is now obviously you're working, or let's say we met at talkAItive, which is an AI platform for business intelligence. And it's an AI that you built as well. So this is a natural language processor that's basically able to take in some information from different routes and present it back to you in regards to specific use cases that people are using for, or how people are actually using this data or speaking online based on the natural language processors. So a sentiment analysis tool. How did you go about starting to build like a natural language processor and building an AI just in general?
It's a good question. So I started off with like kind of just jumping. No, actually, I started off with just research. Like just researching online, as I think any good data scientist should start a project is with research. Start off with research. Kind of getting an idea of the landscape, and then incorporating knowledge that you already have. So I knew from my undergrad that neural networks was a big thing, and then that was many years ago. and then it has blossomed. Neural networks blossomed to what we call today as deep learning. And I, caught up with the advancements of that, and I realized that the opportunity to utilize that tool for something maybe like sentiment analysis is going to be a game changer. And so that's where I took my research, I combined it with things that I knew, and I was like, okay, this is a great application for it.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
because and just to give a background, so one of the clients we worked with is the city of Toronto, and when we did sign or work with the city of Toronto based on using the data. So when we talk about sentiment analysis, we're talking about being able to read a sentence or being able to read what people are saying and break down whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, right? So this way, and the benefit of this to a customer is being able to understand how their clients are speaking to them or how they feel about a product or feel about the company or their service in general, right? Yeah. So that's the benefit of being able to use a sentiment analysis tool. And what we're specifically talking about is he built an AI that's able to read or understand what people are saying online. So, and this you can say things like, hey, I like you, or you can say, hey, I like you. And it can sense sarcasm, which is insane for you to do. Or you can say, hey, I fucking like you. And it can, in some senses, and in most cases, it would read that because there's a swear word as negative. But if you built an AI that's able to understand that when I say, hey, I effing like you, it's actually a good thing, right? Yeah. So being able to tell that it's positive, and derive or pull out the emotion from that, which would be me swearing, right? Which is an emphasis of saying this is where it's actually a positive uptick and something that we would share as a company with a brand to say to them, hey, this is a positive thing. So which is super cool. Yeah. So for me, and that's where you guys had brought me on into talkAItive to basically to help you guys so obviously sell the platform from there. And so what I would say is how did you, and obviously you working with Vibo to build this AI, where did the idea to start, I guess working on a natural language processor come from specifically?
Well, I think it's to be honest, it's not the only startup company I've worked with. In fact, I built AI for it.
Oh, okay. No, please share more. Is it? What would you, then let me ask you this. Yeah. What's the best one that you, or your favorite one that you've created so far?
I think my latest. I think my latest one was quite interesting, and that was without getting into the weeds of it, it was an image segmentation model. And it's quite advanced, and it utilizes some of the core advancements made through some of the bigger companies out there like Meta and Google and Microsoft. So it utilizes some of the key components that they have brought to the table and brings it into the domain for construction. Yeah. So it was a really cool company called Sorted AI out in the UK. And they tracked me down through a friend of mine at that time, and they were like, "Hey, listen, we really have this idea, and it was their idea, right?" And I think that's how some of this stuff happens. It's just you don't need a data scientist to come up with an idea. Yeah, you need them to build it, sure, right? And that's where I come in. I'm like the construction guy, right? Yeah. I'll come in and I'll build you a house, right? Yeah. But it's the kind of house you're looking for. You tell me your dream. You tell me your vision of how you want to incorporate AI, or if you want to just have a consulting talk, then we can do that. But the best ideas that I found are coming from individuals, right? Yeah. And we can kind of brainstorm together to either grow them if that's what you're looking for, or just to get down to business and to build it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So obviously you've had so much experience in terms of building tools like this. Let's get into in terms of what do you. First of all, let's jump into what is AI. Let's first tackle that, and then let's jump into the work you're doing right now in Europe, and how you're helping kind of guide how it's being used, right? So let's define what is AI to start with.
Yeah, AI is
from your understanding, obviously how you'd say it.
Of course, from my understanding. Not from a textbook or anything like that. I would say AI is an ability for a computer to model a system, right? So humans do that all the time, right? We model languages in a form of communication to get our point across. So AI has come to a point where we can successfully model large complex systems.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it is, right? So I think what people think about when AI is, it's kind of like getting more closer and closer to humans, right? And that kind of breakthrough kind of came through this idea of neural networks, kind of come from Toronto, actually. There's a great professor, Jeffrey Hinton, right? He's what is colloquially called the godfather of AI. And his pioneering work among all the many other professors and PhD students working on neural networks really kind of helped to bridge that gap, right, between that complexity. And with the computational advancements with GPUs and vector processing that have been created, that really those two things together kind of created this capability for computers to model a variety of complex scenarios, right, including languages, including vision analysis, audio, right, and tabular data as well, right? So like stock market tabular data was something that was never done before. Now, it isn't the end-all be-all solution, right? Because there are some pros and cons, I would say, to that tool, but it is quite powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so now you're in your role, you're working in Scotland. What's the organization that you're working with again?
Yeah, so at the moment, I work for a regulatory body in Scotland. Yeah, I work for a regulatory body in Scotland. So I work as one of their lead data scientists or senior data scientists there, building out their corporate products.
Yeah.
So that's what I do for them.
And this is, you're helping in terms of obviously guiding how AI is used, and kind of following along the lines of like the GDPR based GDPR. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Based in the EU in terms of how you share personal information online and then protecting user data, right?
That's right. So the UK came out with their own policies, right? And they work quite closely together. But I think some of the three pioneers, I guess. Well, I don't want to say that actually. There are a variety of policies that have come out just recent, right? The GDPR being one of them from the EU, the Online Safety Bill, which is coming from the UK, and the AI policies coming from the United States, right? And there are others, of course, but those are the three that I've heard of. And so I'm working on the UK one, so the Online Safety Bill.
Yeah. So when it comes to AI, especially looking at safety, is there, from your perspective, being someone who has a background and knowledge in terms of being able to build AI itself, and having that experience, and obviously doing that more than once, as you've mentioned, do you see, or is there anything to be afraid of it in regards to AI, or do you see that, of course, there's always room for it to be abused, and there's always people who are going to work on that. But do you see it as a potential risk that's in the immediate future?
I do, to be honest. It's unprecedented, I think, is the way of looking at it, right? So, before, to do anything of this nature, right, before AI, would have taken maybe an army of individuals, and it would be cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't be able to do your idea, malicious idea, we'll say, without AI, because it would have been cost prohibitive. So that's why we haven't really seen it, right?
Yeah.
But now with AI, we're talking that we can do things at a scale that hasn't been seen before. Coupled with the internet, we can do things at a scale that we haven't seen before, right? So we have the means to spread the information, let's say, right? But we also have the means now to create it.
Yeah.
Right? So that could be what have you. It could be as simple as maybe like a fake video, It could be as funny as like, me sounding like you.
Yeah. The deepfake stuff. Right? I've seen that.
Right? Yeah. Exactly, right? So now I can pretend to call the bank. Right? And I can pretend to call the bank, and I can sound like someone else. Right? And if that's all you need to convince somebody that you're that person, that's what you get.
Yeah. Is there any safeguards for this in place currently, or I guess is there any safeguards for this currently?
Well, that's why I think some of these things are coming out, right? Each company, and I can't pretend to know what goes on behind the scenes. I obviously have my understanding of the technology, So I can imagine, and yes, there could be some potentials for this. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of great work being done on this by a variety of institutions and companies and nonprofits out there to kind of get a better understanding of how to maybe detect deepfakes, for example.
Yeah.
Right. But it is quite challenging. You can imagine the scenario being more cops and robbers, right? Yeah. But yeah, there is work. Yeah. There is 100% work being done out there. It's not going overlooked at all.
Yeah. And what, like, for example, as an individual, what would be one of a good way, at least in the meantime, for you to be able to protect yourself from things like, like a deep fake, or how can you do that, I think?
So I think it's to build trust. So I think the analogy that makes the most amount of sense to me is AI is like a friend that you don't know, right? So if you don't know this person, it's almost like a stranger, you're going to want to build trust before you trust their words or trust their output, right? So it's more than ever, it's at that level to critically think is going to be required, right? Yeah. So if you read something online, you just want to question, well, is that true? Because if they're not going to publicize that this is generated by AI or
That's
not,
so true.
You still want to question it, no matter regardless of what was said.
Yeah.
You want to be able to say, oh, if it's malicious or not, you still want to take it into consideration that, oh, maybe it's biased.
Yeah.
Maybe it's coming from a place of happiness. Maybe it's coming from a place of out of contextual happiness, like they just won the lottery and now they're saying all this stuff, but that doesn't necessarily apply.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt still.
Yeah, I think, and I feel like that's something really important to say, especially when it comes to AI, and just living in our society today, because I feel like it definitely applies. We definitely live in a post-truth society where people will say things that aren't true and try and publish that, right? Yeah. So being able to question information that you get is always important to do, and especially with the increase in information being created by AI, it's important to also to question it. But in regards to, I like how you said treat AI as a friend that you don't know, because there's one thing that I learned is, or I read about this, is if you treat for example, if you use like a generative AI, like a ChatGPT or Bard, and you're prompting it, if you treat it with respect, or if you prompt it with respect, like you're like, hey, can you please help me with this? It actually encourages the AI, or it helps it get better results than you, because you're treating it well. It's like you're not just saying, do this. Mm-hmm. It reads into your language, so it responds quite well. So cool. It's really interesting to know that. But also, I think in regards to AI, because AI is coming into our world no matter what, right? Is being able to utilize it and learn how to use it to your advantage, right? Because I feel like, obviously, with the growth in AI, as mentioned, it can definitely help in terms of removing all the admin tasks or other little tasks to help you be able to do a lot more work and do that faster. So I feel like certainly people can take advantage of learning how to use AI now and bring it into their workspace, or bring it into what they're doing currently, which is going to help them accomplish more. Do you feel like, these are things that people can do?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's a tool, right? And the application for the tools, I think, are still, regardless of the fact, we're still human driven. Now, if we start to integrate it, because it's has a lot of automated capabilities, if we start to choose to integrate it into our systems, removing that choice might be more difficult later on, and that's where the problem is, right? And that's where people start to be like, oh, we're taking the control out of us, maybe some big control that we shouldn't have, and moving it to a system that can be auto-generated, right?
Yeah.
And it depends, right? It's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
But it's a great tool to still use, regardless of that that fact. And some of the applications, like you were mentioning, that I've used it as well, is like writing.
Yeah.
Right. I've used it to brainstorm some ideas for me when I'm starting off from scratch and I have no idea what I'm doing. I've used it to brainstorm some ideas. I've used it to kind of like put together some code for me as well, some really simple stuff. I mean, it doesn't do advanced design or advanced code, but if I just wanted like something really simple, I could use it for that. I can use it for a lot of like really interesting applications, like more bigger ones, where if I wanted to, let's say, read through a document for me, and then I just want to ask it questions. right? So that might be more of a product and a scaled system, but quite capable within the terms of current capabilities of AI as well, right? And you may see that product in a few days. You know what I mean? It's like you give this a book, say, hey, this is a link to the book. Let me just ask you some questions about it, and you give me the answers.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So let me to get into more so. What kind of resources, or are there any resources that you can share with people and where they can learn a little bit more about AI and how to you get the most out of it?
Yeah.
And we'll definitely have this on the website too. You don't have to share them with me right now. Yeah.
Do you mind if we take a pause?
Yeah. For sure.
I just gotta take a washroom.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Joe.
Hey Joseph, is that okay?